begin this ceremony of thanksgiving for David's life by listening to the stories. And we have a number of people who are going to share some stories about David. So I'd invite Peter, I think is going to be our first one, if you'd like to come forward. And then just each person after that. So Terry?
Yes.
Yes? So if you, Peter, just if you'd like to come forward, and we'll just have the stories one by one. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Father. Deborah asked me to speak briefly and take 3 minutes to make mention of David and his effect on life as we knew it in Papua New Guinea. Of course, 3 minutes is by no means long enough, for David and I shared some 50 years of companionship in New Guinea. David Andrew de Berigny Wall, who should have been called Wall, was my best friend. He was my best man, and much more than that, he was the best of men. David was intelligent, thoughtful, a kind and gentle person, and a very generous nature, as many impoverished black and white people of Papua New Guinea can testify. In youth, he travelled through Canada, through Europe and Africa, where he was rather proud of following the steps of Ernest Hemingway to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. In the late 1950s, he came to Papua as a young plantation assistant. He later moved to New Guinea and for a time continued a plantation management career with the famous Middleton family estates on Kaka Island in the Berigny province. I first met David in 1965. After he was posted to Angoran on the CBE River, following his move to the Malaria Control Service, to which he was recruited by the late Dr. Jan Sava. Thus began David's long and enduring association with the CBE district of New Guinea. He spent much leisure time chatting with me, as with the late Ron Lucas and Don Bosgard, we more or less ran the Angoran Club, the social centre of a little town on the CBE River, isolated from the main town of Wewak, only accessible through an airstrip when the weather was right. David was treasurer of the very successful Angoran Club. In our lighter moments together, as we coffeed and had something called donkers made by his very faithful monkey master Kami, whose picture is on today's programme of events. He spoke very proudly of his father and his family, and following the marriage to Debbie and the birth of his 2 sons, two very fine sons, and his departure from PNG, David, as you all know, pursued his career with the New South Wales Education Department. But he never truly released himself from Papua New Guinea. In his revealing novel of Angoran affairs and life, he says of his thinly disguised self, "The years he lived in Papua New Guinea have left him with an abiding interest in the country and its people. I would go further than that and say that he loved Papua New Guinea. He got it into his blood. During December, we frequently spoke on the phone whilst I was in Brisbane. And we spoke of his planned revisit to Papua New Guinea in June, when he planned to come up to Wewak. And we had an ambitious idea to write a brief history of Angora. We joked of this, and David said to me, well, there's a few things we've got to be careful about writing about. And I said, well, we're the ones who are writing it, so we're the good guys. The others can do the worrying. David often wrote and spoke out against corruption, against lawlessness, and a general deterioration in the living conditions of the very ordinary people in New Guinea. Hearing of the breakdown of the X-ray unit in the Wewak General Hospital, David contacted senior AUSAG people in Australia and did his best to get that replaced. And now the X-ray machine in Wewak Hospital is working to the benefit of some 300,000 people. David's malaria workers were loyal and appreciative of his help and consideration for their families. He wrote in his Sepik Blue novel, "Sepik people do not forget time long before, so for them the past is a long and living memory." That is true, and it is borne out by the many expressions of dismay and sympathy from the hundreds of Papua New Guineans who spoke to me during my brief visit back to New Guinea last week. I pass to Debbie and her sons and to the greater Wall family the sympathies from Julie and my family, from Ella Lucas, from Ron Perry in Arizona, from John Pasquarelli, from Anna Chu, and from the hundreds of Papua New Guineans who've expressed their sympathy from New Guinea. Finally, I'd like to bear a thought to you all. In Winston Churchill's words, again quoted by David in his novel Sepik Blue Longpula Muruk, as Churchill said, "It is not the end, it is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the beginning of the end." And in a Christian context, we must believe that this is true for the soul of my very good friend, David Wall.